Keltia Prelude, A Guest of the Woods, June 1st, 485 AD, south of Hillir, the Dark Forest. It had been 3 days since Berwyn ap Us had found himself surrounded by a dozen Saxons. The prince had been in the fields that bordered the two shepherds who had disputed about grazing rights on their lands. Did it really matter? Was it worth it? The Saxons had come over the hill and razed the buildings and stole away with most of the sheep. The two shepherds were dead, more than likely, but Berwyn was spared. Did they know who he was? They must have. Berwyn had never bothered learning Latin and Greek, and certainly not the Saxon language. They spoke to him, but he understood nothing save when they clasped him in brass irons around the wrists and ankles. For 3 days he had barely any water and food. He was starving. Thankfully it was summer, else he would have froze to death, as he was left attached to the trunk of a large tree. It was going nowhere. The midges bit his neck and caused nothing but anguish. Would they ransom him? Would they sacrifice him? It was unclear. He sat and waited for his fate, hoping his brother and father would send a rescue party. There were only 12 Saxons, and his people knew the Dark Forest as well as anyone. The Dark Forest, a large wooded area with several small lakes within. The Saxons had used it as a staging ground against attacks against Hillir. But a few people had lived in it, were loyal to his father, and they were to find him. They would either set an attack, or else at the very least inform his father. King Eus had to be wondering where he was by now. Berwyn leans back against the gnarled tree trunk, feeling his coarse bark against the back of his head. Slowly he surveys the area for what must be 1,000 times since being chained here. If his father or brother did not come soon, then he would have to find a means of escape. His strength was waning. He did not think in another day or two he would have the energy to even attempt it. Pulled against the shackles, the metal bands cutting into his chafed wrists, it did not feel like it would break, even if he had twice the strength of the strongest man in his father's Teluo. He needed water. His throat was parched. Food he could gather in the forest if he could manage to escape, but his thirst was killing him. "Water, please. Spare me a drink of water," he called out to all and to no one in particular. "Do any of you speak Brythund? Enough of this waiting. Tell me what you want from me and let's get it over with." He watches the Saxons closely, looking for a response, hoping to gain some insight into their thoughts through their actions, hoping someone indeed speaks some of the local language. The Saxons look down at Berwyn without any sort of understanding in their faces. The men have a small fire going, which Berwyn thinks is rather dangerous. It hadn't rained in 2 weeks, and the brush was dry and ready to go up in flames. They were cooking a bird which smelled next to paradise for the young prince. One of the Saxons, a man with a thick black beard, grabs a big stick and waves it at Berwyn. The man puts a finger over his lips in a clear sign he wants Berwyn to be quiet. Berwyn stares with hatred at the man, but keeps his mouth shut for the moment. Had any of the men spoken the local language, he might have tried to engage them in conversation. Obviously, that wasn't going to happen. He scans the camp looking for anything he can find to aid him in his escape. He looks again at the fire, his stomach growling uncontrollably at the smell of the seared meat. How easily the fire could spread. If he had his hands freed, he might welcome the thought. The flames of a raging forest fire might alert his father's Teluo to his location. Unfortunately, chained to this tree, he would just share the same fate as the birds and the brutes were shoving down the 50 gullets. How could he get free? He could keep taunting the men. Most likely it would just earn him a boot to the head, but perhaps they might unchain him and give him a chance. That was not a reasonable plan. There were still 12 of them against him. They had bested him once, and he had been full and hydrated at that point. Maybe he should just wait until dark when the men fell asleep, and then engage whoever was keeping guard. He worked again at his bonds, seeing if some way he might force the mechanism open. The chains are thick and heavy, but the shackles are nothing special. They were old, very old, likely some sort of spoils from sacking an abandoned Roman town or villa. The Romans had plenty of slaves. Berwyn knew from his father they were rusted, but Berwyn wasn't sure he could break them with brute force alone. Either way, doing so now would catch him a beating or worse. When Berwyn makes not more noise, the Saxon goes back to his dinner. Berwyn decides to wait and watch for now. Once the night sets in and the Saxon starts to sleep, he will look for a chance, possibly to attempt to break the shackles. If no other opportunity presents itself, he begins examining to see just how much use he has of his hands. Berwyn's shackles are held together by a 3-foot-long chain, giving him some maneuverability. He's been playing with a small stick here and there, mostly to pass his boredom. Dusk starts to fall when the Saxon seems interested in something. They stand up, looking toward a part of the forest. Berwyn's eyes spot someone approaching, but as the fire illuminates their faces, it does nothing but cause the prince's heart to sink into his chest. More Saxons. And yet, in front of them is a tall, beautiful woman. One side of her head is shaved, while the rest of her yellow-brown hair is pulled over to her other shoulder. She has a tattoo of a vine on the side of her head that is shaven. She nods with a smile to the rest of the Saxons, but walks directly over to Berwyn. The woman is wearing an ankle-long dress, but split up the front for riding and movement. It was clear she wore leggings beneath. The sleeves were rolled up to her elbows and tied in place by leather straps, and on her hip she wore a sea axe, the sign of a Saxon warrior. Berwyn meets her eyes with his, unblinking. For a moment they try to read each other's thoughts, although there's little hidden beneath Berwyn's stare. The woman is more perplexing to him. Who is she and what does she want? Is she truly the leader of these savages? Who are you and what use do you have of me, woman? Is it Saxon custom to kill their captives by depriving them of water and food? Is that the only way Saxon men can defeat one of my tribe, the Keltia? She smiles, and he does the same, waiting for a blow to fall. The woman stares down at Berwyn, thinking for a few moments before responding as she translates everything slowly. They defeated you with weapons, did they not? She stands back and walks over to the fire, taking up a plate of what remains of the bird. She then pours from a clay pitcher into a cup and makes her way back to the prince. I feed you, yes? She pushes a piece of the bird toward Berwyn's lips, even though her hands are free enough to feed himself. His stomach groans in longing. I was outnumbered 12-1 and was attacked unprovoked. Tell me what you want from me. He smells the meats and his stomach growls. His youthful pride is stronger than his desire for food, however, and rather than eat from the hand, he replies, I will not let you feed me like a child when I can feed myself. Leave me the food or take it away, I care not. I assume you know who I am, although I do not share the same advantage as you.